The rain in Willow Creek had a soft, rhythmic way of flowing, like it had something to say, but didn't want to shout. The streets shimmered under the drizzle, glowing golden beneath the antique lampposts that lined the town's quiet avenues. Inside a little bookshop called Turn the Page, time seemed to slow. Shelves filled with weathered classics and handwritten notes peeked out from the spines, giving the place an old soul charm. Aurora Hart, wrapped in a sage green sweater and worn jeans, sat curled in the corner chair by the window. She wasn't just reading the book in her lap, she was living inside it. Her dark, wavy hair was tucked into a loose bun, a pencil stuck behind her ear like it belonged there. She was scribbling something in a leather notebook that looked just as lived in as the stories around her. She had moved back to Willow Creek 3 weeks ago, after 7 years in the city, hoping to breathe again. Life had become too loud, too fast, too disconnected. Her grandmother's house, now hers, sat at the edge of town, filled with wild roses and memories that still smelled like vanilla and old paperbacks. As she jotted down a line of poetry. The old brass bell above the door jingled, and that was the moment everything shifted. He stepped inside, brushing raindrops from his dark jacket, his presence quietly commanding. Gabriel Cross, 31, a man who seemed like he carried the weight of unfinished stories behind his eyes. His hair, damp and tousled, framed a thoughtful face. A quiet strength rested in his jawline, in the way he looked at things like they were made of meaning. He wasn't handsome in the obvious way. No, his appeal was quieter, like the warmth of a fire on a snowy night. He scanned the room, then headed straight toward the poetry section. Aurora noticed the way he moved, not hurried, not uncertain. As if this wasn't his first time here, though she'd never seen him before. She tried to go back to her book, but her eyes had a mind of their own. He pulled out a worn volume of Rilke and opened it with reverence. She noticed something strange, then he smiled, but it was sad, like a memory had found him unexpectedly. That's when the floor creaked. Gabriel turned slightly and caught her, staring. Aurora's eyes widened and she quickly looked down, cheeks burning. She hadn't blushed like that in years. He hesitated, then walked over. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your reading," he said, voice low and soothing like a song you don't want to end. Aurora looked up slowly, gathering her composure. "You didn't. I was just admiring your choice in poetry." He raised a brow. "Rilke?" She nodded. "One of my favorites. Especially the way he writes about longing." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, like he understood her more than he should have. Longing has a way of teaching us more than contentment ever could. Aurora tilted her head. That's a very Rilke thing to say. A small laugh escaped him. Guilty. "I guess I've read him one too many times. Is that possible? Maybe not." He glanced at the notebook in her lap. "You write?" "Sometimes," she said, tucking it protectively. "Mostly thoughts I don't want to lose." "I get that," he said quietly. "Some things are too personal to say out loud, but too important to forget." There was a long silence, not awkward, just full. The kind of silence that only happens when something invisible is being exchanged. "I'm Gabriel," he finally said, offering his hand. "Aurora," she said, taking it. His grip was warm, steady, like he wasn't just shaking her hand, but anchoring her to the moment. "Nice to meet you, Aurora." He held her gaze just a second longer than most people would. "I just moved here, trying to find, I don't know, peace, maybe. Whatever that looks like." She smiled gently. "You came to the right town?" He nodded. "And maybe the right bookshop." They talked for over an hour about literature, old records, the kind of coffee that made rainy days feel sacred. She learned that he had left a life in architecture behind after something he didn't fully explain. He learned she had come back to reclaim the parts of herself she had lost in the rush of ambition, and when he stood to leave, He hesitated at the door, the bell in his hand. I'm glad the rain brought me here, he said. Aurora's heart tugged at the softness in his tone. Me too. And then he was gone, but he left something behind, not an object, but a feeling. As Aurora looked out at the rainy street, something in her heart whispered that this wasn't the last time their paths would cross, and she hoped deeply, achingly, that she was right. The days that followed were a gentle unfolding. Gabriel kept coming back to turn the page, always around the same time in the early evening, just when the golden hour brushed soft light across the shelves. Sometimes he read, sometimes he browsed aimlessly, but more and more he talked to Aurora. And Aurora. She found herself waiting. She didn't admit it at first, not even to herself. But she started bringing 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, started brushing her hair differently, started checking the time whenever the bell over the door jingled. There was a kindness in him, yes. But there was also something raw, something that hadn't healed all the way. One Thursday, they sat on the shop's back porch. The sky washed in pink and lavender, sipping dark roast as twilight bled into the quiet town. What brought you to Willow Creek? Aurora asked, finally voicing the question that had sat between them for days. Gabriel leaned back, eyes on the horizon. I think I was trying to outrun a ghost. She didn't press. She waited. I was engaged, he said. Finally, 3 years ago. Her name was Naomi. She was a photographer, wild, free. She made everything seem possible. Aurora's hand tightened slightly on her mug. She died, he continued, voice steady, but his eyes gave him away. Car accident. Just like that. Gone. I'm so sorry, she whispered, and meant every word. He nodded, his jaw tightening. After that, I couldn't stay in the city. Everything reminded me of her. Every street. Every place we said we'd go and never did. Aurora placed her hand over his without hesitation. I don't know what brought me here, he said, his voice a whisper. Maybe I was just looking for a place where the past couldn't follow me. She didn't try to fill the silence. She just let it exist, held space for it, the way someone does when they understand pain without trying to fix it. And for the first time in a long while, Gabriel felt like he could breathe. Later that week, she showed him the garden behind her grandmother's house. Wild roses had overtaken the edges, and ivy curled up the old trellis. The swing her grandfather built still creaked in the wind. My grandmother taught me to grow things, she said, kneeling to pull weeds. Not just flowers, people too. She believed everyone was just a seed waiting for the right light. Gabriel watched her with a look she didn't see, half in awe, half in disbelief. He had met many women in his life, but none quite like Aurora. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to impress. She listened out. She saw people in ways they hadn't seen themselves, and somehow being around her made him feel lighter. They started sharing pieces of their lives and stolen moments. She told him about losing her mother to cancer when she was 17, about how her grandmother became her anchor, shared stories of building homes with his father, how his first design ever, when he was 11, was a treehouse that never got finished because his father passed away before they could. They laughed too, over spilled coffee, over bad poetry attempts, over the time Aurora accidentally knocked over a whole bookshelf and blamed it on earthquake tremors. Their friendship became a ritual and sad, unforced but dependable. And beneath it all, a current of something unspoken pulled them closer. One night, after closing the bookshop, Gabriel lingered by the door. Walk with me? He asked. Aurora hesitated, then nodded. They walked in silence through the town square. The fountain glistened in the moonlight. The wind carried hints of lavender from nearby gardens. I don't know what this is, he said, stopping near the bridge that overlooked the quiet stream. Aurora turned to him, heart racing. This? He searched her face, eyes filled with a vulnerability that made her breath catch. This feeling, he said. Like I've known you longer than time allows. Like I've been waiting for this, for you. She didn't look away. Feel it too, she whispered. And just like that, the space between them dissolved. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But the way he looked at her with reverence, like she was something sacred made, her feel kissed in every unspoken way. He held her hand that night for the first time, and it felt like coming home. The air between them shifted after. That night on the bridge they still met at the bookstore, still exchanged coffee and conversation. But now their glances lingered a little longer. Their touches, a brush of fingers when handing over a book, a hand at the small of the back felt electric. Unspoken things danced between their silences. Aurora found herself smiling at nothing when shelving books, her heart remembering the way Gabriel looked at her. Like she was a page he'd waited his whole life to read. And Gabriel he was rediscovering. Colored for so long, life had been gray, dulled by grief. But now, every sunrise felt like a promise. Every sunset, a soft ache of anticipation. One afternoon, she invited him to the annual Willow Creek Book Fair. It was small, just local stalls. Old novels and townsfolk sipping cider under paper lanterns, but Aurora adored it. They wandered together between stands. Gabriel held her tote bag as she excitedly picked up used hardcovers and talked about characters as if they were real people. I always wanted to be someone's favorite chapter, she said suddenly, flipping through an old poetry book. Gabriel's voice was soft. You already are. She turned to him, surprised. He didn't take it back. Later, as the fair grew quieter, they found themselves lying on a blanket on the grass beneath string lights, the stars blinking shyly above them. Do you believe in soulmates? She asked, turning to face him. I didn't, he replied, staring upward. Until recently. Aurora swallowed hard. And now? Now I believe some people are written into your story long before you meet them. Like the ink of their name is already drying on your pages. She didn't answer. She just reached out, lacing her fingers through his. They stayed that way until the world fell quiet around them. Their days became a soft blur of shared stories, meaningful silence and laughter that came easy. One morning, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Thunder growled. Rain poured instead of staying home. Gabriel ran to the bookshop. Aurora opened the door, startled, as he stood there soaked, smiling, breathless. I didn't want to miss you, he said simply. She laughed and pulled him inside, helped her light candles during the power outage. They sipped tea on the window bench, wrapped in a single oversized blanket, watching the world drip outside. Did you always want this life? He asked. Aurora thought for a moment. I used to think I wanted to leave, do something big, be seen, and now? Now I just want to be known, deeply, quietly, truly. He stared at her like she'd just read the thoughts from his chest, and when she rested her head on his shoulder, he leaned into her like her presence was his new sanctuary. But love doesn't bloom without fear, and Aurora, who had lost so much, already felt that old whisper of doubt creep in. She told herself they were just friends, that whatever she felt when he looked at her wasn't real, that the way her chest tightened when he smiled was just admiration, not longing. She told herself not to fall, but one evening she slipped. They were organizing old vinyl records in the back room of the shop, laughing over Gabriel's poor taste in 90s love songs. Okay, but this one, he began, holding up a record with a ridiculous heart-covered cover. I swear, if you play one more cheesy track, oh, come on, they're classics. Aurora rolled her eyes dramatically. You're a lost cause. And then she turned and ran straight into him. He caught her by the waist, steadying her. Neither of them moved. They were close, too close. Her hands were on his chest. His were still gently holding her sides. Their breaths swinged. And when their eyes met, something broke open. Gabriel slowly leaned in. Aurora didn't move, but just as their lips were about to touch, a sharp knock echoed at the front of the store. They both jolted apart. Aurora stepped back, flustered. I should get that. Gabriel watched her go, heart pounding. They almost kiss. Hanging heavy in the air, that night, Aurora couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the memory of his hands on her still burning into her skin. She'd been alone for so long, built walls so carefully, but now he was making her want to believe again. And that was the scariest thing of all. A week passed, and everything changed, not dramatically, not loudly, but subtly, like a favorite song slowly fading beneath static. Aurora still greeted Gabriel with her usual smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Gabriel still came to the bookstore, still brought her coffee, but he lingered less, spoke softer, laughed a little less. The almost kiss had created a fragile tension neither of them seemed willing or able to confront. Aurora found herself dodging the silence between them. She talked too much about books. She kept conversations light. She didn't let her eyes linger on his for too long. And Gabriel, he noticed, but he didn't press. He had loved and lost before. He knew the look of someone retreating. Still, it hurt more than he expected. One evening, Gabriel stayed late at the bookstore, helping her carry boxes to the storage room. The air between them was heavy with everything unsaid. As they stood amid the shelves and shadows, he finally spoke. Aurora, he began, voice careful. Did I do something wrong? She looked up, startled. What? No, of course not. Then why are you pulling away from me? I'm not, she said too quickly. He gave a soft, sad smile. You are, I can feel it. She looked away, fingers tightening around the edge of the box she was holding. It's not you, she whispered. It's me, I can't do this, not again. Gabriel stepped closer. Can't do what? She hesitated. Then, in a trembling voice, fall for someone who might leave. Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. I've lost too many people, Gabriel, she continued. My dad, my childhood best friend, even my first love. People always promise to stay and then they don't. They walk away, or life pulls them away. And I don't know if I can survive one more goodbye. Gabriel's heart cracked. He reached for her hand. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, she said, pulling back. But you could. Anyone could. And I can't let myself fall only to shatter again. He looked at her, quiet and heartbroken. Aurora, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because something about you makes me feel like I've finally come home. Her eyes glistened. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. And Gabriel, feeling her walls go up again, simply nodded. Okay, he said quietly. If you need space, I'll give it to you. And with that, he left. The next few days were agony. Aurora wandered through the bookstore like a ghost. Customers came and went, but her heart was elsewhere. She missed him. She missed his steady presence. His silly music. The way he looked at her like she was a sunrise, but fear held her back. She sat on the edge of her bed every night, replaying their conversations, staring at the corner of the room where he once set a cup of coffee down like it meant something. And Gabriel, he stayed away. He told himself it was what she wanted, but it was killing him. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. No name. Just a single envelope slid under the bookstore door. Aurora picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded the paper. It was Gabriel's handwriting. Aurora, I wasn't planning to write this, but I couldn't leave things unsaid. I don't blame you for being scared. Life has hurt you. Love has left scars, but if you're going to push me away, I need you to know what you're pushing away from. You're not just a chapter in my story, Aurora. You're the plot twist I didn't see coming. The sentence that changed everything. You make me want to believe again, to feel again, to build something that lasts, but I can't fight for something you won't let me hold on. So if this is goodbye, I'll let go. But if there's even a small part of you that wants to try meet me on the bridge, tonight, the same place we watched the sky fall, if you don't come, I'll understand, but I hope you do. Gabriel Aurora sat in stunned silence. Heart thudded painfully in her chest. Could she risk it? Could she really open herself again? She stared at the clock, then at the door. Then, without overthinking, she grabbed her coat. She reached the bridge, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, and there he was, standing at the railing, staring out at the water as if waiting for a sign. Aurora stepped forward, heart in her throat. Gabriel turned. His eyes widened. You came. She nodded. I was scared. I still am, but losing you, that scares me more. He exhaled, relief flooding his face. I don't know how to do this perfectly, she said, stepping closer. But I want to try. I want to believe again. Gabriel reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. I've been waiting to hear that, he whispered. Feels like forever. And then finally they kissed out slowly, softly, deeply, the kind of kiss that felt like pages turning. Like promises being written, the bridge marked a shift. After that night, something changed, not in a loud, sweeping way, but in the quiet moments that stitched themselves into the fabric of Aurora and Gabriel's lives. They started walking home, together again. Only now, their fingers intertwined without hesitation. They sat in the back room of the bookstore late into the night, reading aloud to each other from old poetry books. Their laughter soft and full of something sacred. They didn't rush into love. They built it gently, like two people trying to create something they never wanted to lose. One rainy Sunday, Gabriel showed up early at the bookstore, soaked to the bone, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bouquet of wildflowers. Aurora looked up from behind the counter and laughed. You look like you wrestled with a thunderstorm. I won, he grinned, setting down the flowers, but barely. She took the bouquet, burying her face in it, smiling into the petals. You didn't have to do this. I know, he said softly, but I wanted to. He looked around, then leaned in. I was wondering if you'd let me steal you away for the rest of the day. Aurora raised a brow. And go where exactly? Gabriel gave a mysterious smile. Somewhere you need to see. They drove for over an hour, winding through back roads and sleepy hills. Finally, he pulled up to a small, ivy-covered cottage near a lake, tucked between tall trees that whispered in the wind. Aurora stared, blinking. What is this place? My mother's, he said quietly. She passed away 3 years ago. I've been slowly restoring it. He took her hand. I want to show you something. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of pine and old wood. Everything was quiet, except the rain tapping gently on the windows. Gabriel led her to a small room at the back. It was still being renovated, but a large window opened up to a view of the lake. There was a worn-out armchair, a patchwork rug, and a few scattered books. I've always dreamed of turning this into a writing room, he said. But lately, I imagine it differently. He turned to her. I imagine you here, with your books, your thoughts, your heart. Aurora looked at him, stunned. Gabriel, I've spent most of my life running from things, grief, guilt, expectations, but you make me want to stay. To build something. To be still. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. I love you, Aurora. The words hung between them, as real and undeniable as the storm outside. I love you, he repeated, his eyes unwavering. Not the idea of you. Not some fantasy. You, with your fears, your quiet strength, your love for stories. You. Aurora's breath caught. She'd spent so long guarding her heart, protecting it like fragile glass. But in that moment, something inside her broke free. I love you too, she whispered. Gabriel's eyes softened with something like awe. I tried not to, she said, voice trembling. I told myself I couldn't risk it. But then you walked into my world like you've been written into it all along. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands. You were never hard to love, Aurora. Just waiting for the right person to show up and stay. And then he kissed her. Not like the bridge kiss Dot. This one was deeper. Full of the love they'd been. Carrying in silence. The ache of almost losing and the beauty of finally choosing. Later, they sat curled up in the armchair, wrapped in a blanket as the rain continued to fall around them. Gabriel traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. You ever wonder, he asked softly, why people always say love is complicated? Maybe because they expect it to be, Aurora replied, resting her head on his chest. But this? He said, this feels like breathing. Aurora smiled. Maybe that's what real love is supposed to feel like. Back at the bookstore. The next week, Aurora placed a small framed photo near the counter. It was of her and Gabriel, standing on the bridge, arms around each other, laughing. Underneath it, she wrote a quote. He held me like he'd been waiting forever, and I finally believed someone could. Aurora found it tucked between the pages of an old poetry book Gabriel had returned to her. She opened it without a second thought until she saw the logo on the paper. York Literary Fellowship, recipient, Gabriel Reese, duration, 1 year. Her hands trembled. The words blurred. Gabriel had been accepted into one of the most prestigious literary fellowships in the country, something writers dreamed about their entire lives. Something he hadn't told her about. He hadn't said a word. That evening, she sat across from him in the bookstore's quiet reading room. The letter lay on the table between them like a crack in their world. You were going to leave? She asked quietly. Gabriel looked down, guilt swimming in his eyes. I wasn't going to accept it, but you didn't tell me. I didn't know how, he admitted. It felt like if I said it out loud, it would take away everything we've built. Aurora swallowed hard. You've wanted this for years, and now I want you more. She shook her head, heart twisting. You don't get to choose between the two like they're enemies, Gabriel. You don't have to shrink your dreams to hold on to me. I'm not shrinking anything, he said, voice tight. I'm choosing love. Isn't that what people do when they find the real thing? Aurora stood up, her breath uneven. Love doesn't ask you to give up who you are. Gabriel stood too, reaching for her. Then tell me what to do, Aurora. I don't know how to choose both. I've never been good at that. She stepped back, tears brimming. Then maybe this isn't about choosing me. Maybe it's about choosing yourself. He stared at her, pain etched in every corner of his face. I can't be the reason you resent your life one day, she whispered, and I won't ask you to stay. They didn't speak for 3 days. The silence was louder than any argument could have been. Aurora returned to the bookstore each morning, heart heavy, hands clumsy. Every book reminded her of him. Every quiet space felt colder. And Gabriel. He stayed away. Until the 4th night. He showed up after closing, raindrops clinging to his jacket, his eyes exhausted. I'm leaving tomorrow, he said quietly. Aurora nodded, her throat tight. I accepted the fellowship. She nodded again, staring at the floor. Gabriel took a deep breath. But I'm not walking away. She looked up, confused. He held out a small weathered notebook, the one she'd seen him scribble in countless times. This is yours, he said. It's everything I've written since the day I met you. Aurora opened the notebook. Each page was filled with her moments, memories, the way she smiled at the spines of old books, the sound of her laughter, the weight of her presence. In a quiet room, I'll be gone for a year, Gabriel said, voice thick, but I'll write to you every week. And if you still feel the same when I come back, I'll never leave again. Aurora closed the notebook, her heart aching with every beat. I can't promise I'll wait, she said softly, though her voice cracked under the lie. He nodded. I wouldn't ask you to. I'm just asking for a chance to come back to you. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him tight, desperate, full of everything words couldn't say. Gabriel held her like he'd done on the bridge, like he was memorizing the shape of her heart. The next morning, he left. Aurora stood at the edge of the bridge, watching his taxi disappear into the horizon, and just like that, silence returned. Weeks passed, then months. True to his word, the letters came every Friday. Pages filled with poetry, longing, and moments from the city. He told her about workshops, subway stories, bookstore corners that reminded him of her. She read each one like scripture, but she never wrote back, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what to say. She was afraid of hope, of heartbreak, of whether love could truly survive distance. Until one Friday, the letter didn't come. Or the next week, or the week after. Panic bloomed inside her like wildfire. She searched the fellowship website. She called the number. No response. And then finally an envelope arrived. Inside was not a letter, but a plane ticket. New York City, return, Saturday. From Gabriel. Aurora stood at the edge of a busy Manhattan street, heart pounding. She had no idea what she'd find. She followed the address, scribbled on the back of the envelope. It led her to a narrow, charming bookstore tucked between two tall buildings. The door creaked as she stepped inside. And there he was, sitting behind the counter, scribbling in his notebook. He looked up. And everything stopped. Aurora, he breathed, standing. She didn't speak. She just walked up to him, wrapped her arms around him, and whispered, I'm ready now. He smiled, burying his face into her shoulder. I waited, he said softly, like I promised I would. They spent the rest of the evening in the quiet warmth of that bookstore in New York, where everything felt like a sequel to their story rather than a new beginning. Aurora sat behind the counter with Gabriel, their hands quietly intertwined. For a long while, they didn't need words. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore, it was full of understanding, of shared years, of all the love they'd carried across time and distance. Finally, she turned to him. You stopped writing, she said gently. He nodded, eyes fixed on their entwined fingers. I didn't want the words to feel like a burden. I thought maybe I'd said too much. You didn't. I thought maybe you'd moved on. I tried, she whispered. But every time I closed a chapter, it still led back to you. He smiled, his eyes glassy. I wrote you something. It's not a letter, it's a story. Aurora watched as Gabriel walked to a shelf and returned with a small, hand-bound book with no title. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. It began with a girl who loved words and a boy who didn't believe he had any worth until she showed him he did. Each chapter was a memory. Every line mirrored the heartbeat of their story. The meet cute at the coffee shop, the quiet confessions in the bookstore, the goodbye on the bridge, the ache of distance, the miracle of return. When she reached the final page, her eyes filled with tears. She loved me before I knew myself. And when I finally found out who I was, I realized I'd loved her all along too. She looked up at him. I want to come home, she said. But I don't mean just Meadowbrook. I mean to you. Wherever you are. Gabriel stepped forward, lifting her face in his hands. Then let's build a home in between your world and mine, he whispered. Somewhere we can both dream out loud. 3 months later, they returned to Meadowbrook, not to retreat, but to begin again. On their terms, they opened a small literary cafe just off the main street, a place where stories were shared over. Coffee and silence was never lonely. Gabriel taught writing workshops. Aurora ran a weekly poetry night. The town that once held all their memories now made space for their new ones. One rainy afternoon, while rearranging the shelves, Aurora found a box. Inside were the original letters Gabriel had written during his fellowship. She read them all again, front to back. Every word still made her breath catch. When she looked up, Gabriel was watching her. "You kept them?" she said. He nodded. "They were never meant to be thrown away. Just waited for." On the anniversary of the day they met, Gabriel took her back to the bridge. The sun was setting, the air rich with gold and quiet promises. He took a deep breath, pulled something from his coat pocket. A small velvet box. Aurora gasped softly as he knelt, the exact same way he had years ago, not with a ring, but with a notebook. "Write your next chapter with me," he said. "Not just in stories, but in life." In messy, beautiful, honest days, tears spilled from her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. And so they wrote together, not just on paper, but in stolen kisses behind cafe counters, in Sunday mornings wrapped in bed sheets, in the long walks through the streets of a town that now held their name. Aurora once said real love feels like poetry, but now she knew. It felt like home. He held her like he'd been waiting forever. And maybe he had, but the truth was so had she.